Recording live. So, welcome everyone. This is the Diverse Podcast. My name's Toby, and I'm here today with Aaron Akinyemi, who is a multimedia broadcast journalist and producer at the BBC. So, Aaron, welcome on. Thanks so much for joining. Really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's always great having a chat with you and kind of sharing my experiences and just connecting.
Chat the other day of some of the cool stuff you do, so I'd love it if you tell everyone about that as well. But let's start there at the beginning then. So let's talk about a career in media, what that really means for anyone who's kind of maybe looking at this for the first time. What comes to mind when you say a career in media? What are some of the roles, and give us a bit of a breakdown.
So the media is quite multifaceted, obviously. When I was starting out and I wanted to get into the media, I was more focused on kind of newspapers and magazines and writing. But then I kind of branched out into broadcast when I started freelancing at the BBC, and it kind of opened my world to a whole new, vista of opportunities. So media could encompass so many things. Traditional television, it could be digital media, it could be radio. Over the past few years, there's been a kind of shift away from kind of traditional print media. And even when we look at, traditional television, viewer numbers are kind of going down. Although there's been a bit of an anomaly during the past year because we've been stuck at home because of lockdown. So that's kind of boosted the numbers. But generally, people aren't, consuming media in a linear form. We want something on demand. We want to binge. You can see that trend with things like Netflix, BritBox, 4OD, the way that they kind of produce content. So yeah, it encompasses online media, digital video, digital radio, DAB, traditional television, as well as magazines, quite a wide range of things.
Brilliant. And for anyone who doesn't know, tell us a little bit about what your role entails, as a broadcast journalist and producer. That sounds very cool to me. So give us a quick breakdown of what it is you actually do.
So my role is multimedia broadcast journalist and producer. So basically I film and write stories, so I'm a storyteller. I tell stories on different platforms. So I film content, I edit content, I write articles, and I occasionally present on TV and radio. So it's essentially telling stories, but just on multiple different platforms. And I realized quite early on that I wanted to have ownership of my story. So I knew that I needed to have all the different skills so that I could kind of oversee the whole pipeline from conception right through to publication. So as a producer, I will kind of find stories. I would, look for interesting stories. And then once it's commissioned, I'll pitch it. Once it's commissioned, I'll look for contributors and I will film them. I'll edit, and then I'll publish. So it just kind of encompasses different kind of skills. And I think it's quite important to have a broad range of skills, to have, ownership of your story, and also to improve your worth. I find that now that I have all these skills, I get to, go on these interesting assignments because, why send 3 people to do something that one person can do?
Amazing. So that's a way you've carved out a bit of a niche there, right? By making yourself sort of indispensable. Usually, one person does the, writing or production, but you can kind of do a bit of everything. So, and touch on why it was so important for you, or is so important for you, to have ownership throughout. You mentioned that a couple of times. Why is that important?
I found in the past when I didn't have all the skills, I would have a really great story and someone else would film it or someone else would edit it. And I found that they would get more credit, or sometimes, I wouldn't have that much creative or editorial control once it was out of my hands, or I'd film something and someone would edit it and I'd look at it and I think, I wouldn't have done it that way. So I thought, let me make sure that I have all the skills so that I can kind of take complete ownership of my story. Because I think, owning a narrative is really important, particularly, if you're from, an ethnic background. I think it's really important that we kind of have ownership of the story and kind of control the narrative. And if you have all the skills, then you are in more of a position to kind of control that narrative. Like one of my favorite writers, Chimamanda Adichie, she kind of talks about the danger of the single story and how important it is, to kind of rewrite the narrative. Sometimes, historically, so many communities have had their narratives written for them. So it's really important. It's time for us to kind of, take back control, and that can be in the form of, having the skills to tell your own story.
I love that. I love that. And I love what you've touched on already, because obviously what I'm trying to do is boost representation and diversity at an early career stage, and especially in media as well. And I know there's growing demand to work in the media space, which is really exciting. And then you also, once you get there, want to have ownership of your story so you can tell the narrative in the right way. But let's take a step back and think, I'm a student right now. I'm at university, let's say. Why should I be interested in a career in media? What should the draw be for me, do you think?
Media controls our lives, whether it's entertainment, whether it's information, whether it's education. Media is all around us, and it's so important to kind of to be media savvy, to kind of know how the media works, so that you can, again, it goes back to kind of controlling the narrative. And it's just really important to kind of have an all-encompassing view, of how the media works. It's all-encompassing. It's all around us. So I think, when you look at the way that the media landscape is moving now, if you're not kind of savvy, you're going to be left behind. So it's really important to kind of have, a solid understanding of how the media works.
Yeah, I mean, we see it, every day, really, in terms of its importance in, yeah, as you say, shaping the narrative of what actually happens to how we see it and how we perceive it if it's the news. But then equally entertainment, that influences, children, adults, and the way we see the world as well. So it's kind of the dual element of it's so important to society, but also, the types of content that we're talking about, it is really fun as well. So I kind of think, I study economics, and we were kind of pointed to a lot of roles that you would associate just naturally with that degree. But really, all that did was teach me how to think in a certain way, which you can apply to any industry. So why not think about applying that to media, which is, for all intents and purposes, super cool.
And also in terms of, the platform and the reach that you have, if you work in a media landscape, it's vast. Like the BBC, we have 300 million people who kind of consume our content. So when I look at the reach and the impact that my work has, it's humbling. I remember I did a short film about this woman who lives in an East London flat. She's in her 90s and she's lived there for half a century, but the local council was planning to demolish it. So I thought, this is a great story. So I made a short film about that, and it was published online, and it was published on the BBC News at 6 on TV. And her family said to me, your film saved my mother's flat from being demolished, the impact that you had. So it's, it's humbling when you look at the reach, that you have and the platform that you have if you work in the media. So I think that is a great reason, for a young person to want to work in the media. If you want to have that platform to kind of have a voice and to have a reach and to have a direct impact on people's lives, go into the media, I'd say.
Amazing. So, and that sounds incredible, but I guess my question would be, does it take a long period of time to get that influence and the impact? So I don't know if there's some examples that we can give, like what's normal to start off in terms of position. Is it kind of editor, support sort of role where you're kind of part of a bigger team that would have that impact, or how does it start initially?
To be honest, anyone can have an impact. It's all about having great ideas and executing it in a really good way. And when you look at social media, you realize that you don't really need all the bells and whistles to have a massive, impact. People with a big social media platform have a really big influence. So when you're starting out, I mean, it depends on which route you want to take. If you want to if you're interested in television, traditionally you'd start off as a runner. That's, the really kind of sort of lower level role. And that is just literally just, being in the studio, just, making sure that everything's working smoothly, getting the coffee, learning the ropes, being an assistant, learning about all the skills that you need. If journalism is more your bag, you would start off as a junior journalist, a junior writer, a researcher, a broadcast assistant. So these are the very kind of like basic lower levels that you would start off with, or an apprentice. The BBC has lots of apprenticeships that you would start off with, where you will, you will shadow, senior journalists, you'll act in a support role. And you're also encouraged to be entrepreneurial and to kind of be a go-getter and to pitch ideas. If a senior journalist can see that you have, a desire and a spark, that is a really good way to kind of, work your way, up the career ladder.
Love it, love it. So support, research, but also license to come up with ideas to help the team. So let's dive in even a bit deeper then. So as a journalist, the first few sort of couple of months, when we say research, is that sort of looking around for potential stories that we could do an article on, and maybe interviewing people initially? And is that a good example?
Initially, sometimes it can be even more basic than that. Sometimes it can literally be kind of researching for facts. Like I remember when I was an intern at The Guardian, they had this big infographic project looking at deaths in Iraq. So my job was to kind of look for stats. So you might be asked to kind of look for stats, look for research. Sometimes you might be asked to look for contributors. So going through in-house databases that kind of collect contacts, or using social media, using blogs, using forums to kind of find interesting people that we can speak to, or doing call outs on social media as well, on Facebook groups, looking for Facebook groups. So it's a really kind of basic research, and that is a transferable skill that will kind of last you throughout your career. Like recently I wrote an article about a Nigerian drummer who was born in Lagos in the 1920s, and he got a scholarship to go to the US, to Atlanta, to Morehouse in 1950. And he became really good friends with Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and became involved in the American Civil Rights Movement, which is a really fascinating story that no one had really heard of. So I really wanted to connect with his family, his surviving family. So it was just, I trawled, kind of open media sources, and open media just basically means what's available, what's publicly available. So Google, social media, and I eventually found the social media profile of his surviving grandson, and just kind of trawled through comments and found a comment that seemed like it might have been his mother. Mm-hmm. And through that, I kind of got in touch with his widow, who's, in her 90s. So social media is a powerful tool, and research is a powerful tool. So having those research skills right from an early start will kind of, bode you well right through your career.
Nice. Before we move on, I want to know what you found out from his widow. How did that conversation go?
It was incredible. So his widow kind of had a beef with, I think it was Nina Simone. She was friends with Harry Belafonte. Just incredible, incredible kind of access. And that's what you dream of as a journalist, as a storyteller. And she kind of talked about the role that her husband played in, easing the riots in the 60s. There was something called the Watts riots, and his role in the March on Washington, Martin Luther King, when he kind of delivered that iconic "I Have a Dream" speech. This guy, this drummer, was there, and it was just incredible to be able to kind of get those stories.
That's incredible. I mean, lots of obviously transferable skills from those sorts of tasks. But in addition to that, you're just learning about incredible stories and incredible people as well. So that's a very exciting thing to be doing as well, a young person or anyone in the media space, I suppose. So let's talk now about breaking in. So we've got our cohort of people, our many listeners who are interested now in getting into media. What would be your advice? Let's even make it specific to the BBC. You know, what would be your advice? What would you say the BBC, or maybe yourself if you're ever involved in these processes, what kind of things do you look for in a candidate that would want to work at the BBC? Or, you know, or maybe better question, if you now had to get in, what kind of things would you be looking to do?
So if I kind of came across someone who was keen to get into the BBC, I would be looking at passion. You know, I would be looking at examples that you are actually interested and passionate, you know, about the kind of work that we do. Have you done work experience? Do you have a blog? Do you have an Instagram profile? Do you have a YouTube channel? Do you create content in whatever form that takes? I want to know. I want to know if you do volunteering. I want to know if you're interested in the world. Do you travel? Things like that, you know, things that let me know that you are curious about things, people, places, that you like asking questions. So I always tell people it's really important to get work experience at your earliest opportunity. Again, that shows that you're passionate, you know, from an employee's point of view, and also it provides you with crucial skills, you know, at an early, at an early start, and it also kind of gives you an idea of what the job would entail, you know, if you were to get hired. And sometimes you might discover that actually it's not really for you. You know, when I did work experience at the Guardian, you know, it was actually a lot kind of quieter, you know, working, you know, than I thought it would be. I kind of envisaged the kind of the rush and the thrill of a newsroom, and it's actually, you know, really, really quiet. And I thought, I'm not sure if I'd like to kind of work in a really kind of quiet environment. You know, maybe the kind of thrill of breaking news or broadcast television might be more suited to me, even though I do still love writing. So work experience kind of gives you an idea of what aspect of media you'd like to get into. I would also look for, you know, someone who searches for opportunity. You know, what kind of initiatives have you applied for? Have you gone on any kind of scholarships or traineeships? There's so much out there. You know, I think that's really important as well. So in order to get into the BBC, yeah, so you'd have lots of work experience, have lots of, you know, examples in your CV that you're interested and curious about stories and content creation. It's also really important to kind of look for opportunities. You know, there are lots of networking opportunities that the BBC run, you know, which it kind of provides young people the opportunity to come and meet senior commissioners face to face and pitch articles. And that's how I got in, you know, to the BBC. You know, initially, I went to one of these, you know, networking speed dating events, and I met very senior executive, because sometimes when you're applying traditionally, it can be quite hard to break through if you're applying via the website. So networking is quite important, meeting people face to face, you know, so that they can kind of put a face behind the CV. So that's really important. Also, we've got lots of traineeships and you know, apprenticeships. There's one that's kind of specific for graduates, and there's one that's not for graduates, because there's so many different routes into media. You know, you don't necessarily have to go into, you know, university, although that is the traditional route, and it's easier if you take that route, but it's not for everyone. So at the BBC, we do have a traineeship that's geared specifically to people who, you know, don't have an university education. So whatever your background, if you're passionate, there is absolutely a space for you. If you're passionate about telling stories, if you have the skills and you have the hunger and the enthusiasm, there's absolutely a place for you at the BBC.
That's super interesting. I'm noticing a bit of just trend in the media space. You know, I've worked with Multimedia, and they say very similar things. That it's kind of becoming very apparent to me that because of the nature of the work, you've got to show your interest and your passion outside of, you know, way above and beyond what's on your degree, because they kind of need to seek out the people that are going to be like that and who are going to thrive once they get into the role. So that passion, probably more so than any other industry, might be really important. And yeah, you touched on a few things there, and what I think is also interesting is that it's almost a microcosm of the type of role that you'd have and how you could do well in the role. So that curiosity, the networking, the showing of initiatives, those are all things that would serve someone really well in this position, right? If you're going to be a really good, junior journalist or anything. So I like that. It aligns very nicely to what would actually benefit you in the role.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's a
Yeah.
great point. They're all kind of transferable skills. And at the end of the day, you want someone who is a well-rounded individual. It's not all about work. It's about, your personality, and having those skills, being able to kind of empathize and talk with people and connect with people. When you're interviewing people, it's really important to empathize with them. And it's really important to have emotional intelligence. Like, for instance, I've been working on a series looking at knife crime, and it's a very sensitive issue. And some of the interviewees that I'm speaking to are mothers who've lost, sons to knife crime. So when I'm kind of trying to chase an interview, I've got to be sensitive to that. You've got to have that emotional intelligence. I remember I kind of got stuck around sort of Christmas time and people weren't getting back to me. Then I thought, it's Christmas time. Does someone really want to kind of, rehash memories of their dead child around the holidays? No. So I kind of, left that aside. So, just little things like that, having that kind of emotional intelligence is really important. And, being a well-rounded individual outside of the world of work lends itself well to that.
Fascinating. And yeah, we've touched on it a little bit, I guess, throughout, but what are some of the projects you've worked on or the stories that have kind of resonated with you the most, or you maybe come to mind as kind of your favorites? We had a little chat about, some of the work you've done in, conflict zones, which, blew my mind. So, take it wherever you want to go. But yeah, just a broad question, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, undoubtedly, one of the benefits and perks of, working in the media, being a journalist is, the fact that we get to travel to amazing places that we wouldn't get to go to, otherwise. Something that immediately comes to mind, I worked on a 4-part documentary series on BBC Two with Ade Adepitan. It was called Africa with Ade Adepitan, and he was going on this epic adventure across the continent to see how this dynamic young continent is changing technologically, artistically, in terms of infrastructure. It was really kind of positive, upbeat kind of social travelogue is what I usually say. So he went on, to 12 countries. So I produced one of the episodes, episode 3, where we went across East Africa. So we started in Tanzania. We went on this incredible safari, and then we flew to Ethiopia, which has the most incredible, landscape and history. So we went to northern Ethiopia, in a region called Tigray, which has these churches that have been carved into cliffs, thousands of meters above sea level. So I got to film some incredible drone footage across this incredible architecture. It's just all red rock. If you can kind of imagine Arizona, it's very, very reminiscent to that. And then we took a 12-hour journey from Ethiopia into Djibouti, which is just on the tip, the Horn of Africa. And just met just incredible cast of characters, on this incredible, 12-hour journey. Just as we were about to cross the border from Ethiopia into Djibouti, this kind of circus of Somali market women with these, incredibly vibrant, dresses, colored dresses, kind of bounded on, and they were kind of selling cat, which is this kind of stimulant. And they were bringing it back.
Cats, you said?
Cat, yeah. It's
Okay.
KHAT. It's this kind of stimulant. It's kind of like a drug, like a narcotic. And we were speaking to one lady, and she was just giving us all the information. And another lady came and just started having this argument saying, "Why are you spilling our secrets to the BBC?" And it was just documented gold. And they had this argument in front of the camera. And that is exactly what you want when you're making a documentary. We call it actuality, so unfolding action. It's one of the most difficult things to capture. And that was just documentary gold. That was an incredible experience, a great expedition. I was in DRC making 2 films, one about challenging men's attitude to sexual violence. So there's an organization called the Congo Men's Network, and they work to kind of help men change the way they think about, women and their sexual approach to women, because Congo was notoriously it was called the rape capital of the world. It had one of the highest incidences of rape in the world, and rape was used as a tool, of conflict. So this organization, they thought, why don't we just, instead of just focusing on the symptoms, let's focus on the root cause, which is usually men. So let's change the way they think right from an early age. Really powerful, positive story. So those are some stories that I really enjoyed doing. I was in the US in November covering the election. That was incredible. So I was filming sort of TV packages for BBC World News. We were doing lives, traveling from Atlanta to Washington, DC, to Houston, Texas, meeting incredible people, grassroots, organizations that were working to kind of get the vote. It was obviously a crucial vote, a lot of people wanted Trump out because of his very divisive politics. And there were 12 million eligible Latino voters, in that election, the highest number in US electoral history. And they had the power to kind of, change the course of the election. And Georgia, which is a very kind of reliable Republican state, eventually went blue. It went Democrat, which was a massive achievement. And I remember just being, outside the White House when the election was announced, and just thousands of people just converged on Black Lives Matter Plaza in front of the White House, literally popping champagne, cheering. It was just, I'd never experienced anything like it. Just a feeling of positivity, just shared happiness and joy. It was just incredible to witness. I interviewed the first ever Nigerian congressman to be elected, to US Congress in front of the Capitol, in the US Capitol. That was incredible. That was an incredible experience. I'll be heading out to Tokyo, as I mentioned to you, to cover the Olympics, which is going to be another incredible experience. It's the first. It's an Olympics unlike any other. Foreign fans aren't allowed to go, so it's just going to be completely different. Just to kind of get a sense of what it's going to be like. It's going to be such a privilege to kind of capture that for our audience. And I'm really looking into really interesting stories. I've reached out to this, young lady who's kind of like part of this Afro sort of Japanese hip hop scene. So I'm already kind of thinking about how I'm going to film it, how it's going to be visual, because it's all about kind of grabbing the audience. Because I work in digital primarily, even though I work in television and different platforms, it's primarily digital. That's where we get most of our viewers and our audiences from. And you've got 3 seconds to capture your audience, so you're competing with millions, literally millions of other videos. So you've got to grab your audience within those 3 seconds or you've lost them. So that's a challenge that I relish. How am I going to visualize this in a way that's just going to pack a punch, within those 3 seconds, and grab our audiences in, and just kind of give them something entertaining, but also educational.
It's so incredible to hear these stories, because I think it helps bring it all to life a little bit. We're kind of sat here talking about media, but you've brought it to life with words, which is going to really help people kind of visualize the type of things they could be getting involved in. And this has been the best advertisement for working in media, because I'm sat here jealous for the great things that you get to do, and the people you get to meet, and all sorts. And yeah, and just the way you tell stories. I think one of the beauties of having a podcast is a bit of a life hack, because I get to sit down with people like yourselves, and I'm becoming more and more appreciative of the skills that kind of make them unique, I think. And for you, it's really the storytelling and the communication, right? Because that's core to your role. And I think for people starting out in their careers, this is going to be really important to understand. So the power of storytelling, whether you work in marketing or design or media, or whatever the case may be, storytelling either to your audience as consumers, or internally to get people on board with your ideas and your projects and your it's a similar sort of thing. So again, so to help people kind of upskill and break into these roles and thrive when they get there, how have you been able to enhance and improve on and fine tune your ability to tell stories well and communicate your point effectively? And I'm trying to learn from you myself, so I'm making notes.
So I always tell people to kind of move outside of your comfort zone, do things that might not necessarily come easily to you or might not necessarily be intuitive. So what I used to do, because people are surprised when I tell them that I don't actually really like public speaking. I don't think many people do. It's a very common fear. It's very normal. So what I would do is I would go to public events, public talks, and I live in London, fortunately, we live in London, which is one of the greatest centers on earth. There's always something happening. So I'd literally just kind of go on Eventbrite and just kind of scroll, what's happening in the city, because people just think Eventbrite is just a ticketing website, but you can actually kind of look through interesting events by keywords, things that you're interested in. Meetup is a great kind of app and website for kind of finding out really interesting events and meeting like-minded people. So I'd go to public events, places like SOAS, the School of Oriental and African Studies. They've got a fantastic program of public events. I heard Nelson Mandela's widow, Graça Machel, speak there incredibly. LSE have great public events. There's so much out there that's available. So I would go to these events and I would challenge myself to kind of ask a question publicly in a big, massive, auditorium, which can be quite intimidating and quite daunting. But I find that the more you challenge yourself to kind of move outside of your comfort zone and kind of speak in public arenas, the easier it gets. It's all about practice, So, and I would also kind of challenge myself to kind of go up to a stranger after the event and strike up a conversation, And I would also kind of tell people that you should try going to these events alone, because it kind of forces you to kind of talk to people. Because if you go with your friends, you just end up talking with your friends all night, So it kind of, it's a good way, obviously, to kind of improve your communication skills, the way that you communicate with people, have conversations. But it's also great, to kind of expand your network and networking. You never know where an opportunity is going to come from. I really like poetry. It might not be for everyone, but there are lots of kind of like poetry events that you can kind of go and kind of play with words and express yourself. I think it's really important to be able to kind of express yourself in a kind of clear way. So kind of practicing writing your emotions, writing and performing and speaking is really important. And there are lots of poetry workshops, or poetry cafes where you can kind of go on open mic nights and just kind of, these are very kind of non-traditional ways to kind of, get outside of your comfort zone and practice speaking in front of people. There are also lots of debating clubs, such as the Toastmasters, where they will kind of teach you debating skills, public speaking skills. That's definitely one to look at. Also look at, improvisation acting classes, where you're just kind of thrown into a situation and you've just got to think on your feet. That's a really important way. It's a really good way of, being able to kind of, communicate, quickly, being able to kind of think on your feet, and kind of use your wit. And again, to communicate, so, and you could even try volunteering. Volunteering is great. I've been passionate about volunteering. That's a really good way to kind of talk to people, talk to your local community, just increase and expand your kind of, just increase your kind of public speaking skills and your communication skills. So just kind of go out there. There's so much out there. Interact with the world around you. Find what you're interested in. There's Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park where anyone can go and just kind of talk about anything that they want to do. You've just got to kind of search for things, go out there, engage with your local community, engage with the world, and just the more you speak, the more you communicate, the better you get.
That's incredible. I love how outside the box all those things were. None of that I was expecting, and there's at least one thing someone's going to take away from that. So I think that was really, really powerful. Yeah, I can't really add much to that, to be honest. I mean, volunteering, I like that you mentioned that as well, because sometimes you hear excuses around, not having enough experience or opportunities or, things to have on your CV. but that's one group of people who probably will never say no to you. Do you know what I mean? So there's always the chance to volunteer. You know, we're talking about careers as well. It's an opportunity to help people and help yourself. It's just a no-brainer if you're sitting at home with not much on your CV. So let's talk about diversity in media. Let's touch on that briefly. And it's an interesting issue because I do feel a lot of improvements, a lot of changes are being made. You know, even if you look at Hollywood, for example, significant increase in diversity there with, you know, the winners that we're seeing now versus a few years ago, and you know, still very far away from where we would kind of want it to be, and very far away from kind of representation to the audience. But progress is being made, and you know, I know you like myself are passionate about getting more representation and more diversity into media. And in June last year, I believe it was, the BBC committed £100 million to funding, you know, more diverse and inclusive content and production and so on, which I think is super powerful. So yeah, what are your thoughts on diversity in media? Why perhaps, and to be honest, I don't want to touch too much on why it's been challenged in the past, but you know, what sort of changes are you seeing, and yeah, where do you see it going, I guess? What are your thoughts on diversity in the media? I know it's a broad issue, but to me it's getting much better. But what's your thoughts on it?
Well, yeah, I mean, like you, I think diversity is absolutely crucial. You know, you need people who kind of are from diverse backgrounds, who think differently. So I work in the World Service. So by virtue of that, you know, you need people who have links to various communities. You need people who can speak Japanese or Chinese or Igbo or Yoruba or, you know, Cantonese. You know, there is a clear business need for it, you know, and when you look at the world and, you know, the ethnic makeup of the world, you know, it's majority, you know, people of various ethnic backgrounds. So we need people who are able to kind of connect with these communities. And when I look at some of the stories that I've done, you know, my background has been an absolute asset for me to kind of get, you know, an in various communities, you know. So I think it's really important. There's a clear business need, and I always tell people, you know, you might not think that your background is a plus point, but just look at what makes you unique. Look at your unique selling point and use that to your advantage. You know, if you're from a certain background, you will have an into a certain community, you know, that someone from, you know, a white background may not, you know. And there's also a space for, you know, a working class white, you know, background, because at the BBC, you know, research shows that the further north you go, the more people just don't see themselves at the BBC, you know, whether that's ethnic background or, you know, white working class or northern, you know. So one of the teams that I worked in a few years ago was called BBC Stories, and that was set up specifically to address underserved audiences, and that included ethnic minorities and working class, you know, white communities. So diversity is really important. The media traditionally has not been diverse, you know, and a lot of teams that I've worked in, you know, it's been very kind of monocultural. Even at the BBC, even though we're doing really well and it's a great, massive organization and we are diverse, you know, when you kind of come off the fifth floor, I say the fifth floor is kind of like this bubble, this kind of oasis in the BBC, because that's where the 42 language services are. So every morning you'll always find, you know, someone from some exotic, amazing place, part of the world, just cooking some weird and wonderful, you know, dish in the kitchen. You know, it's just incredible. You know, you just hear lots of different languages being spoken. It's just an incredible, vibrant, diverse community. But once you go outside of there, it's actually not that diverse. And I think that's what we really need to kind of focus on, you know, to kind of increase that kind of, you know, diversity. I do feel that, you know, since the Black Lives Matter, the most recent iteration last summer after the death of George Floyd, you know, lots of, you know, white people have been engaging in difficult conversations. I've been quite heartened, you know, to see, you know, I went on the, you know, Black Lives Matter march, and it was just incredible just to see people from all different backgrounds. When I came out of the tube at Vauxhall, just wall to wall, everybody came together, you know, to kind of say this is not right and we need to challenge this. We need to challenge, you know, structural racism. and it was incredible. It brought lots of people from different backgrounds together. So lots of people are having these conversations. Lots of companies are having these conversations. We've seen quite a bit of change actually since last year in terms of the way that companies approach diversity. They're kind of getting involved and having these difficult conversations, and we are seeing lots of people. I saw lots of Twitter call outs from companies saying, actually, we really need to hear more from this particular community. We need more writers of color. We need more people in the media, from different, diverse backgrounds. So I think there's never been a better time, if you are from an ethnic minority community, to enter the media. We need people who can tell these stories. We need people who have the lived experience to bring authenticity to these stories. We can't do it from people all from, one background. Groupthink is not going to cut it. We need people from different, diversities, and companies now are engaging in that. They're seeing that there is a business need, to do this, and there's a moral case as well. So I do think that diversity is something that is more on the agenda, more so than it was, especially over the past year. And there is still a lot more to do. There was a lot of kind of performative, posturing from companies, professing to, say that they were, posting, black squares and whatnot. And, when you look at the makeup of their C-suite, it just doesn't tally. So there is still a lot of work to do, but I think that we are, at a great place, to kind of push forward that conversation, and push forward diversity. And there are lots of organizations out there that are doing it. Your organization is doing it. You're doing great work. We are Black journals. There are the Black writers. There are lots of organizations out there. Back2 are good. The NUJ have a Black members chapter. There are lots of organizations out there who are helping to kind of push the diversity agenda. And lots of companies have staff membership groups, that are helping to kind of push this agenda. So things are happening. Now's a good time. Diversity is on the agenda, and we just need to kind of continue it. We can't, be lax and just think that, things will just fall into place. Power is never given. You've got to work for it. And but I think we're in a good spot to kind of push that change and drive that change forward.
100%. Yeah, I'm absolutely growing in confidence because, I myself am obviously doing much more than I ever have done before. And, I'm able to make a difference through my platform, and I see others doing the same, and the more the merrier, really. And I feel confident as well because of the employers that I've had conversations with. There's that willingness to listen and learn and say, what, we don't have all the answers, but we're going to try and improve every single year now. And then, like the BBC have dollars or pounds to back up, action and programs to back up diversity statements with action. So I'm certainly growing in confidence. And I guess we've not got long, so I'll kind of I'll get to my last couple of questions. I think you're going to give a great answer for this. So I'm curious, anyone who is sat at home who and when we talk about lack of representation, I think that can permeate and result in a lack of confidence and a feeling that, okay, Aaron, someone else can do it, or this person is able to do it, but I'm not sure I can. What would you say to that person who's at home thinking, I'm not sure I can get into media, or I've tried and I've kind of been facing rejection after rejection, during a very, very difficult period with the pandemic and the impact that's had on the job market? What would you say to that person listening?
I would say that, when you look at successful people, some of the most successful people in media, you just think that it's just been a straight kind of easy ascent, but no, it's been really, really difficult, and people might look at my CV now, my job now, and just think, it's been really kind of easy. You've got a great job, but it's been really, really tough. I've been in the media for, 13 years now. The majority of that has been, part-time roles, freelance roles, fixed-term roles. I went through a period, of unemployment for 7 months. That was really, really tough, but I turned that around. When I had all that free time, what did I do? I looked for, initiatives. I looked for, fellowships that enabled me to kind of see the world, that they would pay for me, to kind of go and see the world on conferences. And that gave me the ability to kind of network. And also it gave me material to, pitch articles and kind of increase, my own employability. So it might seem, that it's difficult, but you eventually get where you need to get. You will eventually get where you need to get. So I think it's just really important to kind of, have in your mind your end goal and work really hard in order to get there. It's difficult, but it's not unattainable. I remember, at one period I was working, 2 jobs, because I was just that passionate. So I had, a full-time job Monday to Friday, but I was passionate about the media. So I had a weekend job, working for an online news magazine. So I was working 12 consecutive days. I had 4 days a month where I was off, where, I didn't have to work, and I'd just sleep because I was just exhausted. I remember at one point, and I had sort of 2 jobs, and I was still kind of freelancing on top of it because I was that hungry and that passionate. So I would wake up early in the morning, work on a freelance article, then go to work on it in my lunch break, and then work a weekend job. I remember at one point I was trying to conduct an interview in the toilets of Marks and Spencer, which sounds absolutely nuts.
Did you get it? Did you get that one?
It didn't work.
No.
I had to kind of do the interview another place because there was no others. I was trying to do it on my lunch break. But that just kind of just shows the passion that I have, and if you have the passion, you will eventually get where you need you want to get to. So I think it's just important to have a focus, have a view of your end goal, and work really, really hard in order to get it. And reach out to people. No man is an island. Even though I've worked hard and you've worked hard, many people have worked hard. It's not, purely meritocratic. We benefit from people who help and support us and introduce us and give us opportunities. So reach out to people. Don't feel that you have to do everything on your own. I always am happy to kind of hear from people who kind of want advice or want connections. I'm passionate about, giving people that advice. I didn't always find that in my kind of career starting out, but I'm passionate about helping people. There's a space for everyone. There is a space for you. It might be hard to think, it might seem impenetrable, but there is absolutely a space. As I mentioned earlier, you don't necessarily have to go to university or have a degree. As long as you're passionate and you have great ideas, and you know how to tell a good story, there is a space for you. So it might seem difficult, but it's attainable. There are lots of really successful people from, minority backgrounds. I'm part of a really influential WhatsApp group that's run by Afua Hirsch, who's, hugely influential. And there are dozens and dozens, over 100, successful Black broadcasters, Black and Asian broadcasters, so they are there. There are lots of people that I could name, Brenda Romanos, Gary Young, Afua Hirsch, there are lots of people out there who show you that it's possible, and especially now when, the world is rapidly changing, we need people who have, connections in different communities, who can, tell stories with authenticity from their lived experience. Use your USP. What's your unique selling point is you. It's your background. There's no one else like you. No one else like you. So use your unique selling point, use your lived experience to tell those authentic stories that you're passionate about. And you don't have to wait in order to get into the BBC or ITV or Sky News or CNN. Start telling your stories from your mobile phone. I have created content for television that's been broadcast, through my mobile phone. So there's no excuse, you just go out there, create content that you're passionate about. That is the starting point, and then success will follow.
Incredible answer there, Aaron. I mean, I feel like I should leave it there, but I just want to sneak in one last question. One last question, and I'm so glad you were so honest about having been out of work, 7 months, and just to see where you are now. It's just so inspiring because that's going to happen to so many people. It's probably happened to so many people who are listening, and just to see someone else who's kind of got through it, it's incredible. But I'll sneak in a very, very last quick question. So, after all that, after that journey to be where you are now at the BBC, is there any feelings of imposter syndrome or anything like that that makes you feel uncomfortable at any times? And if so, how do you get around that? Does that resonate at all?
To be honest, because it's been such a difficult journey, it kind of makes you appreciate everything, you know. Like I know the journey that I've been through. I know how hard I've worked. So I feel that I've earned my place at the table. You know, I feel that I've earned it by right. I've worked hard, you know. But I mean, it's a common, feeling, to feel kind of, oh my God, what am I doing here? I remember I worked at HSBC actually in the media department for a year, working, in Canary Wharf. I was wearing this kind of suit every day into work. I was getting paid lots of money, amazing perks. My office was at, the 41st floor, with this incredible view. And I remember thinking, how did I get here? So I guess, maybe there were some feelings of that there, but then you just got to think back to, your your journey. You got to think back to your journey, what you've done to kind of get where you are, and you realize that you've earned the right to be where you are. You've earned the right at the table. So that's what I would say to anyone who's kind of, feeling a sense of imposter syndrome. You absolutely have a right to, to success. You have a right, to sit at the top table, purely by virtue of, of who you are and, your background.
Mic drop. We'll leave it there. That's incredible. I mean, I just got to thank you, Aaron. I think that was absolutely brilliant and yeah, hugely helpful. I'm sure you've inspired people. And yeah, if you're listening at home, I hope you're inspired by that and keen to start your career in the media industry. And who knows, let us know if this has had an impact on you and kind of what the result was. And you can reach Aaron on LinkedIn. You can find him there. Of course, I'll put a link in the show notes to his profile. But yeah, Aaron, just thanks so much for doing this. It was incredible.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure. And I'm always happy for people to reach out to me, social media, whatever. If you want advice, I'm here.
Love that. Perfect. We'll leave it there then. Thanks so much, Aaron.